Welcome back to Movie Monday, where we not only review movies here on the channel, but we talk about the firearms used in the movies, the props, the guns, the rocket launchers, the planes, whatever it might be, depending on what's heavily used throughout the movies. And if you're like me, you kind of notice these things where you're like, oh wow, is that even a real thing? Why is there no sight on that rifle? Why are they using a 22 as a sniper rifle? Interesting, there's no mag changes. Things like that kind of intrigue me. And ever since movies like John Wick, where they really harped on the details of using firearms in a real life scenario, not doing proper reloads, proper tactics, all that stuff, you kind of notice these things throughout movies, and it sometimes takes away from the movie. So we want to talk about how the firearms are used in the movie and how well they are used in the movie. So today's movie is actually one that just came out in 2025, just recently, called Warfare. Let's dive in. What is Warfare about? Well, it's a 2025 film written and directed by Ray Mendoza and Alex Garland. Now, it's based on Mendoza's experiences during the Iraq War as a U.S. Navy SEAL. The film depicts an encounter where he and his platoon experienced on November 19, 2006 in the wake of the Battle of Ramadi. Most of the film is exclusively taken from the testimonies of the platoon members, and it's presented kind of in real time. Now, what that basically means is this movie is unlike a lot of other war movies out there. It's an A24 film, and that being said, it really feels like an A24 film. It's depicting this platoon of U.S. Navy SEALs in a house and going through the motions, doing the jokes, doing the kind of quick little quips and things like that that you would see that a platoon would do with a lot of the downtime they might have in between a mission or while they're on mission and nothing's happening while they're just kind of observing, which is the big part of this movie. So if you're looking for something with whiz-bang action, constant action, this might not be it for you. In fact, it does pick up quite a bit in the second half of the movie. The movie's only about 90 minutes long, so it's a pretty short one, but it's really a day in the life, which is kind of fascinating if you're into that kind of thing, to kind of understand kind of what they were going through, what their mindset was, what they're doing. And the cast has a lot of good folks on it that you might have seen in other movies, like Will Poulter, Cosmo Jarvis, Kit Connor, Joseph Quinn, Michael Gandolfini, Charles Melton, Noah Centineo, and Taylor John Smith, and many others. Now, Will, he actually you might know from We're the Millers.
Kenny, listen to me. Hey, calm down, all right? You're not gonna die. Will you tell us what the hell's going on?
Just tell us what happened.
Spider bit me, David.
What? Where? Where did it happen?
Bit me on my balls.
Now, he's grown up now.
New guy energy.
I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the storytelling. I enjoyed kind of watching the day-to-day motions of this platoon of U.S. Navy SEALs. So it's worth a watch if you're into that as well as I am. That being said, how were the firearms used in this movie? I think they were pretty good. It's over almost 20 years ago now for when this was taking place, and I'm sure a lot of the stuff isn't made anymore. So from a producer and director kind of setup, they need to kind of think about what they can gather, what they can put in there, and I think they did a really good job. They didn't just throw anything in there for the movie. A lot of what the platoon is using is what they used at the time. So let's just dive in. SIG P226, right? That is the U.S. Navy pistol of the time. They don't use it at all through the movie, but I was watching on their hips what they have, because I love my P226. I have a West German, fantastic handgun, one of SIG's bests, in my opinion. And that being said, they have them on their hips, holstered. They never draw them, but you can kind of see that very unique shape of the grip. So the P226 definitely makes an appearance on several of the soldiers in the U.S. Navy SEALs throughout the movie. Now they're in Iraq, so of course, what is the #1 battle rifle used in Iraq, or the #1 rifle in general? Well, it's the AKM, right? So the AKM, I have an M70. I love that thing. And with that, the Z-Paps are great, being a Yugo pattern, but the AKM is 7.62 by 39. Very recognizable. Gotta love a good AK. The M4A1 carbine, that is kind of the standard throughout the movie, and it would have been heavily used in that theater in the Iraq War back then as well. You see them with Holosuns and aim points and PECs and CAC vertical grips, all of the stuff that you would see back then that was already issued at the time. That is kind of the go-to for the rifle for a lot of the platoon. There's a couple of things that sneak in there, like an MK18, which is like a mod 0 CQBR, so it's like a CQB type of setup for a rifle. For the longest time, there's one guy that is essentially a sniper, a designated marksman, set up there with a bunch of mattresses looking through a tiny hole, keeping an eye on what they're observing, which is a bunch of the hostiles kind of moving around, kind of looking for guys with weapons, looking to start a fight and things like that, and kind of seeing if they've already given away their position. So this guy has this sniper rifle, which is actually a Knight's Armament SR-25, and he sits behind there with his spotter, and they keep rotating back and forth. They sit behind there all day with that rifle looking through that small hole there until things pop off. And that's a good choice. That's, again, something at the time, and it would have been a good choice for that range because they were really just looking across a set of roads, maybe a couple of roads, and it really wasn't that far of a distance to kind of have a spotting setup like that. The MK46 and the MK48, some of which had the paratrooper style collapsible stock on there. Now this is for suppressive fire, and they use that to that advantage when they're trying to move throughout the building, when they're trying to leave the buildings, things like that. When they're moving around, they're using that to just dump rounds across the road into buildings and try to keep the guys with the AKMs down below those walls. So that checks out. That seems to be something where they would have on hand, and they even have a couple of reloads with the box mags, which is kind of neat. So they actually have the box mags. Guys have a couple of on their vest there where they actually grab the boxes out and reload them. So reloads are doing pretty well throughout this movie. In fact, they go and reload a lot of the AR mags. You'll see them drop a mag, and just even if it's not fully loaded, you don't really see too many rounds or anything. I don't remember, but at least, you know, they drop the mag, whether there's a rounds in it or not, and they go and reload it and top it off for the next engagement. So that was good to see. There's a PKM, however, is never shot. In fact, I remember seeing it, I was like, oh, PKM, and they were like, there's a guy running across the backdrop of this shop when things are about to pop off, and he's like, PKM, PKM, because they're looking for firearms at the time, because they're kind of seeing who is hostile, who's going to shoot back, things like that, who is collecting, and there's a gathering of military-aged males, you know, it's what they're kind of looking for. So PKM is mentioned but not shot. Also never used in the film is an M79 grenade launcher. It's on the back of one of the seals. It's talked about, and you can kind of see it. They talk about the M79, but he never pulls it out. That would have been fun to kind of see just because that's a nice little thumper. To pop this whole thing off, and I don't know if you guys want to hear the spoiler, but this next part's a spoiler. A grenade goes through that little hole that the guy's holding with that Knight's Armament, right? With that rifle for that sniper position. Grenade goes into that hole, so they know they've been had. They know that they know what the seals are, and that's an F1 hand grenade, which would have been used at the time. They talk about smokes and claymores, so they have smoke grenades, so they have the M18 smoke grenade. In fact, they have spares in backpacks, and they're like, where's the smoke? And they'd go back and grab them in like these little pouches on the side of their bags and then throw them out to go and get cover to try to exfil out of the location. And there's also claymores, which I thought was interesting, around the entire building. So they had it as a backdrop where it's something where if something went wrong, they were going to pop claymores off and get out. And they did. So they had the M18A1 claymore, very functional, useful, it seems, as a defense mechanism to kind of push anyone away at the time, because they were worried about people on the roof at the time when they're in this first floor and second floor of the building. There's actually M2A2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles. However, they're actually British FV43230 MCVs that are mocked up to resemble the Bradleys. In fact, I was like, that's not a Bradley when I first saw it, but they're kind of marked up to be it. That being said, they have the M242 Bushmaster chain gun on there. They actually use that stuff. A lot of times they don't fire off live rounds or fire off the blanks out of any kind of tanks or anything like that in this kind of a movie, especially being A24 like this, but they're firing the chain gun and they're lighting up buildings. They're talking about, take out that second floor, and they just go and sweep the whole second floor. And then lastly, they do call in air support, and they want to have a show of force. So you never see them drop anything. There's a constant surveillance going on, whether that's aircraft or drones at the time, but looks like maybe an F-18 comes through a couple of times, like show of force, and they just go and low pass through the whole street and just like dust storm the whole thing, and it's just a nice big boom, and it's designed, I'm assuming, to kind of get heads down and scare any hostile forces. So that wraps up what's in this movie for firearms. It's a fun gunplay type of movie, showing real gritty action from a military standpoint, what these soldiers had to go through, what the SEALs were going through, what the hostiles were using, what they were doing. You don't see too many up-close videos of the hostiles shooting their AKMs or, of course, like the PKMs and all that. But, you know, they have some here and there where you kind of see them from the distance, but it's really focusing on this Platoon. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's only an hour and a half long, which I do appreciate because it's just a nice little quick story and you kind of understand what these guys go through and where they ended up and how they got out, and unfortunately some of the guys who got KIA'd and all that. So with that, guys, thank you so much for watching Movie Monday. I hope you enjoyed my review of Warfare. Train hard because you really never know what's coming. Make sure you take care of the ones you love because those are the ones that matter, and we'll see you on the next Movie Monday.